Right, so now that it is 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, we are going to get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Colorectal Cancer and the Alaska Native Diet Fiber for CRC Prevention, hosted by the American Indian Cancer Foundation and presented by Dr. Timothy Thomas. We are recording this webinar, so it will be available to watch on demand. We will also be sending out the PowerPoint slides so that you can view them, as well as an evaluation. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments by leaving them in the chat box. I've been having a really hard time getting them in the Q&A box, so again, please use that chat box. I will do my best to go through them as we present. Today's webinar is a part of the Colorectal Cancer webinar series. Today, Dr. Thomas will be discussing the topics of colorectal cancer and the Alaska Native diet. Native people have the highest colon cancer rates in the world. Studies show that diets have a crucial impact on the kinds of bacteria living in the colon. While many of these bacteria help humans digest food and keep the lining of the colon healthy, other harmful types irritate the cells that line the colon and can lead to colorectal cancer. Fiber is the fuel that keeps the digestive tract regular and plays an important role in preventing chronic disease. Those who eat a fiber-rich diet tend to have healthier colon linings because they possess more of the good types of bacteria. This webinar will discuss colon cancer, the Alaska Native diet, and ways to increase fiber intake for cancer prevention. So again, today's presentation will be given by Dr. Timothy Thomas. Dr. Thomas is a medical epidemiologist for the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, currently serving as Director of Clinical and Research Services Department in the Division of Community Health Services. Dr. Thomas has been involved in the Alaska Native Tribal Health System on and off for many years, both as a clinician and researcher. He worked in Bethel and Anchorage as a family practice doctor in the 1990s before completing his epidemiology training with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. He has subsequently been engaged in research in Kenya working on HIV and in Alaska. In his current position, he oversees a staff of 30 who conduct multiple research projects, including liver disease and hepatitis, adolescent health, primarily addressing violence and STDs, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, tobacco cessation, colon cancer, water, and sanitation. Dr. Thomas has been a part of the ANTHC since October 2011 and now serves as its executive committee representative for National Institute of Health, American Indian, Alaska Native Clinical Translational Research Program. For the last 6 years, he has been a member of the Alaska Area Institutional Review Board and has also served on the ANTHC Board Health Research Review Committee. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, for being here with us today and presenting on this topic. I will let you get started now.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Maybe hard to solicit for hands raised, but if you can't, I guess let Misha know. So I just wanted to, so my presentation is I'm going to start off with maybe just a few slides to discuss, just give you a context of ANTHC, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, in case you don't have any familiarity with it. And then we'll get into some discussion around fiber, colon cancer, and the work that we're doing up here. There's a YouTube in the middle that I'm going to stop sharing and ask Misha to share from her end. Hopefully the systems will work for us on that. So I'll get started here. So ANTHC, this is just a picture of the Alaska Native Medical Center on a summer day, I should say. It doesn't look like that right now. But if you have a chance to get up here to Alaska, it's a beautiful facility, and we're very proud of it up here. And it's got some great artwork inside, and it's a great place to visit. So please come by if you are coming through Anchorage. So ANTHC's vision is that the Alaska Native people are the healthiest people in the world. I feel very proud and honored to work for an organization with a vision such as that. So Alaska is a huge state. It's larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. But as you can see on the map here, the red lines indicating the road system. There's not too many roads. Most of Western Alaska, there are no roads. And there are probably about 178 communities that live off the road system. And primarily those are connected through small aircraft all year, maybe in winter by snow machine, and by boat if they're on a river system or coastal system during the summer. The population of Alaska is about 710,000, 20% of whom are Alaska Native people. So here's a typical, pretty remote community in northern Alaska. Again, transport by small aircraft, boat, or snow machine. There are still many communities in Alaska that do not have piped water, and people are living off of very small quantities of water, around 2 gallons per person per day, which is way far less than WHO recommends as even a minimum amount for reasonable health. Costs are very high. Milk can cost $12 a gallon. Fuel is high, around $6 a gallon. The picture on the top right is most of these communities have a water treatment facility, so people will be collecting water in the unpiped communities from a water treatment facility. We call those self-haul communities. People have to go and collect those themselves. As far as the health care in Alaska, in the tribal healthcare system, it's essentially broken up into 12 major regions. There are some smaller ones. Many of these 12 have their own hospital. But basically, it's, healthcare has been provided through the US government up into the 1970s. Between 1970 and 1998, the Alaska Native people started to organize and assume ownership of health services as became part of the Alaska Tribal Health Compact that gave the THOs autonomy to provide healthcare in their regions. And then in June of 1998, ANTHC assumed the responsibility for operations of IHS programs. And since then, basically all Alaska Native healthcare has been provided by Alaska Native organizations. This just reflects the tribal healthcare system, sort of the hub and spoke. Anchorage is, I can't point, well, I'm not sure if I can point to it, right there in the middle there. But then these hub communities all have their sort of regional hospital. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but in Western Alaska, I worked in Bethel, which is in Western Alaska. And that region there serves a community, an area about the size of Oregon, with about 50 communities staffed by, with their own community clinics, staffed by community health aides. And then patients would then be referred to Bethel for higher level of care, and if needed, into Anchorage to the Alaska Native Medical Center, shown in the picture on the bottom right, in the same place that I showed you in the first slide. So now moving on to discussion around cancer, housed within the ANTHC is the Alaska Native Epidemiology Center, and they produce many reports. This is one of them that's come out fairly recently. I think there's an update coming out. A 50-year report should be coming out this year, reporting on cancer in the Alaska Native people. And some of the things that they're reporting on, basically here, a listing of the leading cancers in Alaska Native people compared to US whites. You can see for Alaska Native people, the leading cancers are breasts, colorectal cancer, lung, prostate, and kidney. And colorectal cancer is 2 times higher than it is for US whites. Lung is 1.5 times higher, and kidney the same, 1.5 times higher. For US whites, prostate is a leading cause of cancer, but for the Alaska Native people, it's significantly lower, and similarly for melanoma. This graph here shows the rates per 100,000 for colon cancer. In the top chart are Alaska Native, are men, and in the bottom one are women. And the two lines there show Alaska Native men in the light blue, if it's coming through as light blue on your screen. And the dotted line are US whites. And you can see there that, you know, rates for Alaska Native people have sort of hovered around between 80 and 110 per 100,000 over the course of the years, basically ever since 1969 up until 2013, as opposed to US whites that were high in the 70s, but have dropped significantly to around a rate of around 40, between 40 and 50 per 100,000. The lower graphic shows a pretty similar rates for Alaska Native women, and again, a significant difference between Alaska Native women and US white women. I think this basically just shows you again that colon cancer is the second most common cancer overall for Alaska Native people after breast cancer, and is the second, also the second leading cause of cancer death after lung cancer. So clearly a huge problem for Alaska Native people. This graphic shows the incidence by age, again comparing Alaska Native people to US whites. And you can see that in the age groups along the bottom, you can see that even at age 30 to 39, there is it's not a huge difference, but there is a significant difference starting to develop between Alaska Native people and US whites. And that just increases over time. But basically, as a result of this, seeing these high rates starting at around age 40, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium has been promoting the initiation of colon cancer screening at age 40 rather than what's recommended for the country as a whole, which is at age 50. So that is being implemented across the state through the tribal health organizations, is that people are being brought in for screening, or certainly there are recommendations that people come in for screening starting at age 40. This slide here just shows you the rates for those different regions that I showed you earlier. And basically, you can see that the rates are fairly similar. I mean, there's some variation, but fairly similar across most of the state. Rates sort of ranging between 80 to, well, in fact, Arctic Slope up in the north, 178 per 100,000. And the Southeast, considerably lower, probably a little bit more similar to the lower 48. But basically, statewide, the average is around 90 per 100,000. These rates here are the highest rates reported for anywhere in the world. So why are we seeing more colon cancer up here in Alaska? Well, we'll get into discussing that. We're certainly seeing an aging population, so that may be one contributor. But again, we do see this colon cancer starting at a very young age. So that age does not explain all of this. But we do have very high tobacco use rates. Unfortunately, rates are averaging across the years. This graphic shows the Alaska Native tobacco use rates around 40%, and that's declined a little bit more recently, but not very much, and still a big challenge. And we certainly have some variation, certainly up in the north, about 52% of the adult population are using tobacco. It is not traditional or used for ceremony historically or currently in Alaska. So well, I'm now going to stop sharing, and we're going to just give you a little bit of a background as we move into some of the discussion around fiber. And I'm going to stop sharing. I think I need to stop sharing and have Misha bring up the YouTube. Hopefully this is going to work. Should I do that, Misha?
Yep, so I can share my screen here.
Okay, I'm going to stop.
Perfect.
So just before I get started, maybe just hit pause. So this is a gentleman that's going to feature a gentleman that we've been working with, started working with more recently. So go ahead. Sorry.
In Pittsburgh, researchers are exploring just how eating mostly plants may promote health. Colon cancer specialist Stephen O'Keefe spent many years working in Africa, where he saw very little colon cancer among his patients. But when he moved to the United States, he was struck by the fact that African Americans have one of the highest colon cancer rates in the world, even though many are genetically similar to Africans.
Studies have demonstrated that the factor most associated with differences in colon cancer between Africans and African Americans is diet.
Most Africans tend to eat more vegetables, fruits, beans, and whole grains, and less processed food than we do in the West. And those plant-based foods contain substances our bodies can't digest, which we call fiber. We understood for a long time that fiber was important, and we thought it was important to help people overcome constipation and improve transit time of food through your body. But O'Keefe's studies reveal that fiber does something else. It feeds bacteria in the colon that help to keep it healthy by producing a compound called butyrate.
Our cells don't produce it, but bacterial cells do. If you eat enough fiber, you maintain a bacterial population that convert the fiber into butyrate, which maintains the health of the colon and prevents cancer.
Fiber is food for these microbes. And if you don't feed it to them, they're not going to be well, and you're not going to be well. And the less fiber you eat, O'Keefe has found, the more bacteria you have that make harmful compounds that can lead to cancer. Since the Western diet that many African Americans eat is low in fiber, and most Africans get plenty of fiber, O'Keefe wondered what would happen if Africans and African Americans switched diets. O'Keefe's team fed fiber-rich diets to African Americans and fiber-poor diets to people in South Africa.
And then we basically measured substances that are good or bad for the colon before and then 2 weeks after their dietary switch.
After just 2 weeks, the amount of harmful compounds increased in the colons of the Africans, while the amount of beneficial compounds like butyrate increased in the African Americans.
This is a butyrate. It's very dramatic. It's very easy to see.
Yeah.
The exciting thing is that by changing your diet, you or I can influence our risk of colon cancer in just 2 weeks.
So the larger lesson is that we're not just eating for ourselves. We're eating for the trillions of microbes that inhabit us.
Okay. See if we can get back into share mode here. Okay, share. Are we back on?
Yep.
All right. So that's, I think that's a useful YouTube just to set the background for the work that we're doing. So some of the slides here might overlap with what you've just heard. We'll go through them quickly, but basically, there's work that's been done over a number of years here. Here's some reference to an article by Dahl and Peter, who are famous epidemiologists, who really looked at the rates of colon cancer across the world. And you can see from this map, areas in Africa in green have very low rates of colon cancer compared to certainly North America, Europe, and Australia, and Japan. And some of the things that are risk factors or foods or other items that health factors that increase risk, certainly red meat, processed meats. Obesity has been associated with increased risk of cancer, certainly alcohol and cigarettes. And then, as we've heard, in terms of decreased risk, fiber, fish oils, antioxidants, and other items. Just to sort of add more data to the idea that maybe fiber or certainly environment is a component, some studies have looked at first generation sort of Japanese people who moved to the United States and demonstrated that basically within one generation, you saw increased rates of colon cancer. You can see on the bottom left where it says colon, the first bar is the parent rates, and then the first generation in the United States seeing much higher rates of colon cancer, suggesting that it's not only a genetic, that there is an environmental component, and clearly diet may be a major component of that. We've talked a little bit, or you heard a little bit about the microbiota. Certainly it's living, it's a vibrant mass of organisms within our body, has a high metabolic rate. The liver is known as the organ with the highest metabolic rates, but the bacteria in our gut have also similar high metabolic rates. As you've heard, they're very dependent on what we eat. They synthesize and secrete a wide range of bioactive molecules. Certainly the microbiota that are in our gut are in close proximity to the epithelium of the gut. And in a healthy gut, there's a sort of a mutualistic relationship that's antineoplastic. In the diseased situation, it's antagonistic and potentially carcinogenic. I don't pretend to be an expert on bacteria and the various bacteria that are living in the gut, but this graphic was basically trying to demonstrate the difference in the predominant populations of bacteria, certain species of bacteria in the gut, Prevotella being very predominant in the Africans, and Bacteroides in the African Americans. And the Bacteroides are do not produce as much butyrate as the Prevotella species. Some of the metabolites that are produced by these bacteria, some that are more inflammatory include hydrogen sulfide, and secondary bile acids. And then, as we've heard earlier, the anti-inflammatory substances, particularly the short-chain fatty acids that are acetate, propionate, and butyrate, is the one that seems to be an important component. So butyrate, again, we heard, is produced by certain types of bacteria. It's the preferred energy source for cells of the colon, as opposed to glucose, which is the energy source for many of the cells in the body. It's anti-inflammatory. It regulates colonic epithelial growth by promoting differentiation and inhibits proliferation. It's an antioxidant and promotes DNA repair, and plays a major role in mucosal defense. So touching on the African-American studies, the study that you heard about, Africans rarely get colon cancer, rates of around 5 per 100,000. African-Americans, the highest rates, aside from Alaska Native people, African-Americans have the highest incidence of colon cancer in the United States, around 65 per 100,000. Fiber in the diet has been well recognized. Again, an epidemiologist, Dennis Burkitt, noted that Africans were consuming lots of fiber in the diet and had low rates of colon cancer. And the fiber content was estimated to be around 50 or more grams per day, which is much higher than the USDA in this country recommends around 25 grams. There's a slight variation between men and women, but certainly the African component was much higher. This is going over what we just heard about. Basically, in that study, the Africans were brought into facilities, a place where he could control the diet for both the African-American participants and the folks in Africa, and did colonoscopies and took biopsies of the colon and stool samples at the beginning, had this 2-week dietary intervention, and then did colonoscopies again and got biopsies again and more stool samples. I won't belabor this because this just shows you again the increase in fiber for African Americans went up from around 7 grams to 55 grams. So this is just looking at the butyrate levels. You saw a screen from an NMR probably, but showing you in the left-hand graphic, you've got butyrate levels before and after for the African Americans, and you can see a significant increase for butyrate levels. And then for the African participants, a significant decline in butyrate levels from before and after. Even at the mucosa level. So in a study like this, we can't really wait for 20 years for somebody to develop colon cancer. So you look at sort of some precursors of colon cancer, and one of them is to actually look at the mucosa and look for inflammation at the mucosal level. And these are all slides showing different sort of markers of inflammation. And again, significant declines from people going from the American diet to the African diet, and increases for the Africans going from the African diet to the American diet. And those are represented more graphically in the bar charts on the right, again, just showing significant changes at the mucosal level. So what about diets in Alaska? Certainly, there's a lot of healthy components to the diet, a lot of fish that is consumed across the state. A lot of traditional foods are available out in the tundra and on seagrass, sea asparagus up there on the right there, fiddlehead ferns, blueberries are abundant up here in the late summer and early fall. Again, subsistence is a major way of life for many people, particularly in rural Alaska, but also in urban settings. But if some studies that were done by University of Alaska in Fairbanks looked at the diet, components of the diet, and demonstrated that the fiber component was around 8 grams per day. So whilst the other components of the diet, particularly the subsistence diet, are high in biological value and good for health, the fiber component was quite small. And so we did some studies with Dr. O'Keefe, and we initially just collected stool from people from parts of Alaska, here in Anchorage, and then up in Utqiagvik and out in Bethel, and looked at butyrate levels and the short chain fatty acids. And basically, if you look at the butyrate levels, you can see that in blue are the Alaskans, in the orange are African Americans, and in green are the Africans. And you can see that the butyrate levels for Alaskans and African Americans are fairly similar compared to the butyrate levels for Africans. So we have started a study here in Anchorage with Dr. O'Keefe. We call it the FIBER study. It has a long name for NIH, Randomized Controlled Clinical Trial of Fiber to Reduce Colon Cancer Risk. Basically, we are recruiting people into the study who are healthy Alaska Native people who are coming in for their screening colonoscopy at the Alaska Native Medical Center. We're asking them to volunteer. Basically, inclusion criteria is that they have to be Alaska Native people, the age that screening is commonly done, BMI of 18 to 40. There are some exclusion criteria if they've had a history or family history of certain colon cancer conditions, or antibiotics within the previous 12 weeks, because that's going to disrupt the microbiota. And then basically we do kind of what he had done in the other study, where at baseline we recruit people, again, who are coming in for the colonoscopy, ask them if we can collect stool, blood, ask them if at the time of screening we can collect some biopsies of the colon. There are also a breath test which can reflect methane and hydrogen in the breath. After the colonoscopy, there's a stabilization period because the cleaning of the colon is disruptive to the microbiota in and of itself. And then we randomize folks to a resistant starch, a fiber in a powder form, or digestible starch also in a powder form. We can't tell the difference. This is what they add to their diet. They're on this for 4 weeks, and then we repeat many of those same studies at the end of the 4 weeks, where we don't do a colonoscopy, we do a flexible sigmoidoscopy, which is slightly less invasive, again to collect biopsies. The taste of the powder, it's pretty tasteless powder. We have participants mix it in whatever they desire drink, water or milk or orange juice. Our target is to try and get up to about 50 grams of fiber per day. So the fiber in and of itself provides around 35 to 40 grams of fiber. There's not a lot of calories in this. The taste, again, and of the appearance of these two powders is the same. And so we are all blinded to who's getting what, and that will be blinded at the end of the study. Where are we at this point? Well, that's a slightly old slide, I'm sorry, but we have about 53 people have been totally enrolled at this point, and 8 people have withdrawn. Most of them withdrew basically because it was just a time issue. And we have 31 people who've now completed the study. Again, mostly people withdrew because they didn't have time. One was advised by her naturopathic physician to withdraw. One person complained of some gas and abdominal discomfort. And then one person was deemed to be ineligible after enrollment, so was withdrawn from the study. So what are sources of fiber in Alaska? Well, I've sort of alluded to the foods that are available out, the wild plants that are out on the tundra. Here's a listing of things that are available across many parts of the states, and their fiber component per cup per serving. So we started another study we call the blueberry study. A cup of blueberries produces 4 grams. Certainly one is not going to be able to eat 10 cups of blueberries a day, just blueberries. So certainly mixing it up, blueberries and other foods, would be an important thing to do. There are certainly other benefits to high fiber diets, reducing colon cancer risk, reducing cholesterol, aids in digestion, weight maintenance, helps control blood sugar levels. And there are certainly other benefits too to getting out into the tundra. It does encourage physical and mental wellness, connects people to their ancestral knowledge, encourages outdoor activities. But there are some challenges. Certainly, it takes time. There are economic constraints. Climate change is having an impact in Alaska in a big way. We don't really know how it's all going to shake out, but there are, people who are talking about how now blueberries are no longer coming where they used to come, or the caribou are migrating a different place. So trying to sort of, coordinate when they can go hunting for the caribou at the same time as picking blueberries has become a challenge. And then additionally, there are sort of regulations and restrictions and pollutants that are concerning people. There are other sources of fiber that could be available in stores. Things like whole grains. These are important contributor to fiber. What is a whole grain? It's a plant with the entire grain seed fully intact, has important nutrients like fiber, vitamins, proteins, and minerals. A lot of that gets removed in the processing of grains. And so certainly those foods with whole grains are healthier than those with refined grains. What's available in the stores is a challenge. Certainly if you go out to stores, like I showed you that picture of remote parts of rural Alaska, many of the foods even that I've listed on this table may not be available. Certainly the source of access to vegetables is very limited, and you go out to these stores and there may be one moldy cabbage that's been sitting there for a few days. It's a real challenge getting fresh fruits and vegetables out there. But there are some more things that are shelf stable. If you look at this list, things like black beans contribute a high amount of fiber. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of consumption of beans. I think there may be some historical issues related to that. But certainly these are some other sources of foods that could be available in stores that would provide some fiber. So we are sort of challenged now. We're trying to move on from the current study that we're doing, which is providing fiber in the form of a powder, saying, okay, how can we translate that into foods that are available, out on the tundra and at village stores. And so we are embarking on a study to try and work with a more rural site that doesn't have access to the large grocery stores that we have here in Anchorage, and see how we can do this, work with communities, say, first of all, does this interest people to explore this? That would be the question number one. And then if so, how can we do this? How can we get more fiber into the diet? And then maybe do a similar sort of pilot study to demonstrate the impact of even just 2 weeks of increasing using traditional, foods that are available out in the tundra or store-bought foods, and see if we can get people to, do that over a 2-week period. Perhaps look at the stool, the microbiota changes over that 2 weeks. Again, maybe recruit people who are coming in for their colonoscopy and do some biopsies at the time of their colonoscopy and see if there's been any changes. So that's something that we are embarking on. We've had some discussions with Maniluk Health Association up in the northwest area of Alaska. There are some initiatives here at ANTHC one initiative that has been promoted is the idea is one called Store Outside Your Door, was to really try and get communities to look at what foods are available outside their door to supplement or to supplement the fiber in their diet. Another initiative that ANTHC is engaged in is promotion of symposia around use of Alaska plants as food and medicine, and these have been ongoing over the last few years. So that's kind of where we are with colon cancer, what we're trying to do about it. There are some other initiatives at ANTHC to really try and engage people in coming in for screening. I didn't really talk about that so much. We're engaged in some other studies trying to look at simpler ways to test for colon cancer that would not require coming in for a colonoscopy. We know that a colonoscopy really is pretty invasive. It takes time. There are other mechanisms out there, just stool tests like the stool DNA test, but that hasn't yet sort of really got it out into the rural areas so much today. So I think I'll stop there and see if there are any questions or thoughts and ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I don't see any questions in the chat box, so I'll give you guys a couple minutes to think, or maybe a little bit to think about questions or comments that you want to leave there, and then I'll let Dr. Thomas know. So in the meantime, I just want to remind everyone that we will be sending out an evaluation link. If you could fill that out, that would be really helpful to let us know what you think about this webinar, which will inform other webinars that we host in the future. I don't see any questions. So if you guys do have any questions, you can feel free to follow up with me at health@acaf.org. Otherwise, you can reach out to Dr. Thomas, I am sure. We will provide our contact information in a follow-up email. Thank you to everyone who joined us for today's webinar. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, again, for sharing your insight and expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So again, if the audience has any additional questions or you'd like to connect directly with myself or Dr. Thomas, you can reach out to us through the website for American Indian Cancer Foundation or Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. And thank you all again for your time, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.